Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patrick Millikin from Poison Pen Bookstore, and I'm really pleased to be sitting here doing this program with Femi Kayode. Close. We've been going back and forth on the proper pronunciation, and I'm just trying not to try too hard. Femi Kayode. Right.
Yes.
And he is the author of a remarkable first novel called Lightseekers, which we're going to be getting into. And you have a really interesting background. So let me give you the formal introduction. Femi Kayode trained as a clinical psychologist in Nigeria before starting a career in advertising. He has created and written several primetime TV shows, which I want to get into a little bit, and recently graduated with distinction from the University of East Anglia Creative Writing Program. Where Lightseekers won the Little Brown /UEA Award for crime fiction. He lives in, is it Windhoek?
Windhoek, yes.
Windhoek, Namibia. And this is his first novel. And boy, it doesn't read like a first novel. This is a really impressive piece of work.
Thank you.
Yeah, so welcome. It's great to finally get a chance to meet you and do this. We've been planning it for a long time.
Yes, Patrick, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be talking to you directly like this because I've really admired your work and your bookshop for a very long time. And you've had some of my favorite authors on so many times. And I'm sure you always see me making comments and going, yeah, and all that. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So let's just get into the book a little bit here. First of all, let's talk about the title, because I found that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
The title, it's one of those titles that's very very provocative, and it does double, triple duty. Can you talk a little bit about the title?
Okay. Yeah. The title is the last part that came. I wrote the book under many titles while writing it, but I think the title was the last one that came, and it came. It's not that it was contrived; it actually came, but essentially it came from the story itself, because this protagonist, this hero, is a guy that is an investigative psychologist, and his job is to shed light into the crime. His job was to find the reasons why something happened, and so in a way he seeks light, he seeks understanding, and he seeks clarity, so to speak. And the antagonist, well, you can say the villain, is a split personality person who, when one personality takes control, he says he has the light, is in the light, and when the other personality retreats into the shadows, he says he goes into the dark. So there's this whole play of light as taking the spotlight in terms of coming to the forefront, and the idea of seeking knowledge and truth. But beyond that, from a full story point of view, and I know it's getting more and more complicated, but really I love it, because it's the whole story is really just how truth changes according to the light, according to who is putting the spotlight on it, according to the perspective that we see it. And so the whole book is divided into 3 parts according to the laws of light, the laws of reflection and processing. And so that's basically it. I've actually never unpacked the title like that in any of my discussions, but that's really it.
Yeah, it's a lot of each act. There is a separate statement about light, and a kind of a metaphor, if you will, that advances the story forward. And also on a literal level, I mean, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but
yeah, it's okay.
In a literal level, there's these blackouts that occur. So there's literal light and darkness that occurs in the book, and it's very important in a lot of ways.
I find it interesting because you are you're the first, I would say, Western reader that actually tapped into that. Most of the time, I always have into the blackout issue, the fact that in Nigeria, we have less than 8 hours a week electricity, and that we refer to electricity as light. And most of the action in the book happened during blackouts, you know. Yeah. And so it's very interesting because I generally have to point it out to other Western readers as to why so much happened in the dark and things like that. But you just tapped into it straight up. Yeah, so that's true. That's the fourth level of light.
Well, it's wow. Interesting because the the individual, as I said, it works on all sorts of different levels. There's the individual story of trying to get to the truth. And then there's the larger sort of philosophical notion of us collectively kind of stumbling towards the light, and not really making our way, but whatever. Let's get into, as a Western reader, it was really educational for me, and that's one of the things I love about reading crime fiction that's set all over the world. You get a real, you get you learn about the culture and the background. And it had me looking up things, and it seemed, a lot of it seemed disturbingly familiar, There are a lot of direct parallels that I saw with, contemporary Nigeria and Mexico, for instance. Some of that, the inequities and disparities between the haves and the have-nots. So just briefly, you mentioned your protagonist, Dr. Philip Taiwo, is that right?
Yes. Yes, you got that right.
Taiwo. I'm just reading it the way it looks on the page.
Yeah, Taiwo, yes.
I mean, the obvious question, I'm sure you've been asked millions of times, is, he's an investigative psychologist. And you make it very clear at the beginning, this guy's he's not a cop, for one thing. And he's not really a detective, but in a way he is, but he's an academic.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the kind of grizzled, experience that a homicide detective would have.
Yeah.
In some ways, he's a little bit naive. But anyway, can you kind of outline the true case, the horrific case that inspired the plot of the book?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, let me just take one quick step backwards and talk about the parallel between, for instance, contemporary Nigeria and Mexico, for instance, that you referred to. Actually, I never thought about that, but what I really wanted to talk about really was actually the similarities between contemporary Nigeria, for instance, and a lot of Western countries like your country, because, and how vulnerable societies are to social media, for instance, and misinformation, for instance, and that my attempt really was to talk about our shared humanity, and that, given the right circumstances, given the right stimulus, given the right environment, anything can happen. The same thing can happen anywhere, that kind of thing. So yes, I can see the parallel with Mexico, but I can also see the parallel with United States, in terms of the Capitol, the uprising and the use of social media to do that. You can also see that, I see that also in the UK, even while I was in school there, in terms of how it's so easy to trigger, groups of people. We see that in the rising anti-Semitism that is happening in Europe, for instance, and how social media is fueling that. We see that in Israel, where we have a huge amount of underreported apartheid and the relationship between Israel and Palestinians, for instance. So for me, what I really wanted to do with the book was really to tell a story that was maybe as gruesome as possible in its most extreme form, but to actually use that to have an understanding and to show my country and my people in perhaps the most unflattering light, but you really using that to create a sense of, oh, I get it. Finally, I get it. Finally, I see it. And I was very happy that I was able to do that, because a lot of people have come to me and they've told me how much they see of their societies, and their humanity in such stories and such actions. What happened that inspired the story was really a true story. I think about 8 years ago, 4 undergraduates in a university town, and this is not a small university town. This is a big university. You would call it almost like it falls in one of the top 10 universities in the country. It's federal. It's a federal university. Federal meaning that you guys would say state-owned, but it's for us. There's federal, there's state, and there's privately owned universities. So it's a federal university, meaning it's a big university. It has students from all over the country, of all ethnic groups, because that is the federal character that must be reflected in a federal university. I don't know, maybe that makes sense, but as against a state university, that most of the people that would go to that state university the priority would be given to people local, from that state, and people that go to a private university, obviously, is because they can afford it and things like that. So they're separated by class and elitism. But a federal university exhibits federal character. That university has been in that region, in that locale for decades. They've lived with strangers for decades. And out of the blues, 4 young undergraduates were lynched by the whole community and burnt alive because there was suspicion that they were armed robbers or they were robbers. And it shocked the world. I mean, the video, if you actually Google YouTube now, you would actually see the video of the killing of these kids. And I've always wondered why YouTube never put it down, because it's gruesome. It's really, really terrible. And I just couldn't reconcile my sense of my community or my country with that kind of gruesome act. Yes, we're used to what you say, a corrupt government. We've talked about politicians, we've talked about crime, we've talked about so many things. But this is the first time I was actually witnessing or questioning what people do to people. What people do to people. And it inspired me to start asking that question. What would motivate people to do something like this? What exists in the environment? And how do people do it? I always wondered, do people come together and say, do they target somebody? Is it spontaneous? And then when it happens at the end of it, and when the act and the deed is done, do they go away and say, oh, that was a job well done, we should do that again next time, kind of thing. So that really inspired me to want to tell the story. And because I had so many questions, the only protagonist I could create was an investigative psychologist. And I promise you, even at that particular point in time, I didn't know exactly what an investigative psychologist did, but I did know that there's a field of psychology called investigative psychology. So I had to go and research it. And in theory, an investigative psychologist is simple. You're just the auditor of investigations. That's all you are. You audit an investigation to be sure that an investigation has been done appropriately, to ascertain that a crime has actually been committed. So an investigative psychologist, for instance, would question the police interrogation method of an accused to be sure that indeed the interrogation was proper and you have not forced the accused to lie, for instance, or you've not tortured them to lie, because then they will check the environment and all of that. So that's really what an investigative psychologist does in theory, which is to audit investigations. And this protagonist comes into the story because the case has already been sorted out. We know who did it. We knew what happened. And the father of one of the kids is now asking, I need some answers. And you're an investigative psychologist. I need you to find out why this happened. And that's really how the story took shape. I found the right investigator and the right crime, and I put it together. And the rest is, I just started, as I wrote chapter after chapter, I started finding out what happened next.
Right. Well, you know, let me make sure I've got the chronology right. So Dr. Taiwo Philip comes back. He's returning to his home country. He's been living in the States, living and working in the States. And I love his wife, by the way. I love the two female kind of leads, Salome. Is it Salome or Salome?
Salome, yeah, Salome is fine.
And you're gonna have to help me with his wife's name.
Folake.
Yeah.
Folake.
They're both really wonderful characters. So he's come back to Lagos.
Yes.
Lagos, right? And it's the crime is, it's been a few years since this actually happened in the book anyway, right? It's a few years after that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as you say, the big banking executive hires him
to
go and make sense. In some ways, to give him the answers that he really needs or wants to hear, you know?
Yeah.
Which isn't quite going to happen. And so he goes into to talk a little bit about where fact and fiction depart in your handling of the case. So it's clearly based upon this real life incident from 2012. I think you call it is it the Okriki 3?
Yes. Yes.
And you know, obviously one of the murder victims is this executive's son. And so he goes into Port Harcourt. And can you describe it? It's in the heart of what would be Biafra, right? The Biafran. Is that right?
Well, yeah, that's what you say. What you call the southeastern part of Nigeria, Port Harcourt, is, I wouldn't say it's the heart of Biafra, but it's part of the Biafra, what you call the Biafran region, simply from a regional point of view. Where does fact and fiction depart? Fact and fiction departed from the premise. I really, the case that inspired it was 4 boys, for instance, 4 undergraduates, for instance. And I actually started out, I wanted to write a non-fiction book because I was a true fan of Capote's In Cold Blood. I loved In Cold Blood. I thought it was a brilliant piece of storytelling, you know, and I really wanted to write, so I wanted to explore the original case, you know, and I went to my tutors in school to say, this is the story I want to write. And they were like, okay, they asked me ethical questions. They asked me, you know, all of those research questions and all of those things. And I said, okay, well, I think I might have to write it as a fictionalized version. So it couldn't be 4 boys because I couldn't explore that. So I made it 3 boys. I fictionalized the town. The 4 boys originally were called the Alu 4, and I called mine the Okriki 3. There is no investigative psychologist, and for me, my approach was really to look at the environment where this crime took place and look at what I constantly refer to as the systemic issues that made it happen.
Right.
That made it possible.
Sure.
You know, just for looking at the level of insecurity in the environment that makes people so jittery and people so afraid of their own shadows. For instance, looking at issues of xenophobia, the ethnic tensions amongst people, which is very, actually, whether you like it or not, is reminiscent of racism in its own part. This fear of strangers or anti-immigration, for instance, you know, on your from an American's point of view, that's the only way you can parallel it. I looked at
what about tribal identity? Isn't that very,
exactly.
very important?
Absolutely, absolutely. And why would your identity be threatened in the first instance? You're who you are. What threatens your identity? There's also the issue of resource control. This is a part of the country that produces the largest amount of crude oil, but actually benefits the least from the crude oil that like literally pumps or feeds the nation, in quote. So there's a lot of disparity and a lot of inequity and inequality that fueled this kind of spontaneous violence, amongst the group, and that was really what I really wanted to explore. So it departed from reality, from the premise, because I wasn't interested in what really happened to those four boys in the true story, but I was speculating what could have made it happen. What could have made it happen? What could have contributed to this happening? Hundreds of people can't just pounce on another human being without something in the environment feeding into it. There must be some anger or energy or aura in the environment that, like a demon, literally, eating at them. And I really was interested in unpacking this demon, and that was why I created this villain that a lot of people have said, oh, but I don't understand that villain because it seems like it's a split personality. But for me, the villain was the system. The villain was a composite of the country called Nigeria, split, schizoid, post-colonial, abused, raped, stripped of its resources.
I totally get it now that you mention that. I can, everything just kind of connects when you explained that. Yeah, because there are these little alternating chapters from the villain's point of view, which are very intriguing, and they kind of guide you along, and you're not sure what exactly they mean for a little while.
Yes, for a little while you don't, but a lot of people didn't give it, they're not patient with it, but a lot of Nigerians got it. As soon as almost all Nigerians got it, there's no Nigerian that has questioned the presence of the villain. But most other readers come back and they're like, I still don't get the villain. Did we really need the villain? But if you actually study the trajectory of the villain, you actually literally take the history of Nigeria, from the British, colonization, to independence, to the Biafran War, to where we are now. You realize that to a large extent, the reason why we are where we are is because we become quite schizoid. And we start feeding on our young. We have quite a number of situations whereby people like me had to leave the country to realize some of our dreams, for instance. And the fact that these four young men in real life, brilliant undergraduates in a very, very competitive, academically sound university, were killed by villagers, tells you that the country is not even protecting its young. So it actually feeds on its young, in a sense. So to a large extent, that's what the villain was. So there's a huge departure from what really happened as soon as I got my premise in place, that I wasn't interested in what happens to the guys in real life. It's too late, I can fix it. But I was more interested in the systemic issues that led to something like this happening and will happen again and again and again.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Now that you're talking about it, it does seem very contemporary, and it does seem very universal, I guess you'd say, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's what's going on in this country. Well, we don't want to go into that, but
no,
yes.
We don't want to. But you that's the thing, Patrick. You Americans, you sometimes say, what's going on in this country? And I keep having that conversation. There's nothing exceptional about what is going on in your country. It's Americans just have to come to terms with their humanity. You're part of the world. You know, you are humans, and you know there are crazy people amongst you, and there are really smart people amongst you, and there are really religious people amongst you, and I think the one thing that makes your country special, and I speak because right now I'm speaking from, you know where I am, I'm in Illinois, right? Is that America, because of the multinational nature of America, the nuances of humanity, for good or bad, are heightened. You know, they are heightened. You know, they are much more pronounced because you, as a nation, you're a hybrid of many, right? So
Right.
you have so much that come to the fore simply because of the fact that you are a mishmash, a mixture of so many things, so many cultures, so many. But at the end of the day, you're still like everybody else, right? And that's one of the reasons why my investigative psychologist, the protagonist, kept relating the lynching of the boys to the lynching of blacks in Mississippi.
Sure.
And that was how he was
Absolutely.
able to, why he was able to find insights into the case. And that for me was a deliberate, extremely deliberate act on my part to tell what you can say, the Western reader, to say, you're not so different. Your histories are not so different. And actually, our current, modern day experiences are not that different. You know,
Right.
the circumstances are different, but the reactions of people when their self-determination is threatened, when their livelihood is threatened, when their self, the sense of self, is threatened, is extremely similar. You know, so this guy, for instance, one of the insights that he was able to come up with was the fact that, you know, he wanted to find out why these three boys were killed, or what led to it. But he had to find a motive, right? There needs to be a motive. But how do you find a motive from a crowd? And he then went, how do you find a motive with a crowd? And he went back to the studying of the lynching in Mississippi, you know, and realized that it's a collective act with a single motive, which is that it becomes collective because that's the only way we can avoid accountability. But there is a source. There's always one source of where this comes from, you know, at the end of the day. So it was a very interesting story for me to write. And everybody will always ask me, did you plot it out? I didn't. I really wanted to put myself in the space of exploration. And so I always joke, I love that saying a lot, that I'm one of those writers. I write because I want to know what happened. And that was really what I did. I really wrote it because I really wanted to know what happened. This is the scenario. This is what happened. This is what happened. This is what we're investigating. I had no conclusion. I had no resolution. I just wanted to see where the story was going to take me when I put all of those ingredients together. You know, it's almost like when you go into the refrigerator and you open it and you see this and this and this and this and this. You know, there's this cooking show that you guys have in the US that, you know, you tell the cooks, they just go into the grocery store and they have to pick this and then cook anything. That's sort of how I approach writing sometimes. You know, this I know my villain, I know what happened, but now I want to know why it happened, and I want to know what exists in the environment that made it happen. And so I get into the car and I say, drive.
Well, maybe we could get into a little bit. Part of the real magic for me was the relationship between Taiwo and Chica. Is that his name?
Yes.
Chica?
Yeah. Chica, yes. Yeah.
Who, you know, in many ways, Taiwo seems like he's almost like an outsider in his own country. You know, He comes from the States where he's an outsider. He comes home and then he goes into this environment, and, you know, the level of distrust, and, you know, and then he has this driver, Chica, who is really his guide. into this environment, this culture. And the friendship and their relationship, I thought, was really beautifully done.
I think, for one thing, is that I go home a lot. I go to Nigeria a lot. My parents are there. My friends are there. My family are there, and things like that. Even now, when people say, "Oh, hi guys, where are you from?" My son will say, "Nigeria." I'm like, why don't you tell them we live in Namibia? It's like, yeah, but we're from Nigeria, kind of thing. So our sense of identity is actually very strong because we go home a lot, kind of thing. And every time when we go home, one of the things that I experience is a sense of otherness. Like I feel ordered in a sense, like almost like I'm a foreigner in a sense. And it starts from the plane, as soon as we start getting down, the plane starts coming down, you start hearing people going, oh yeah, things are going to get really chaotic now. There's no electricity. And you get all this mourning and whining, and there's a lot of almost superiority that what we call returnees bring to the country, like we are somehow suddenly superior because we've lived outside the country and we've escaped the madness, so to speak. And the people that exist or that stayed behind are a strange form of people, a strange group of people that cannot be explained because nobody can explain this phenomenon called Nigeria. What I try to do with Chika and Philip is to humble Philip and to show him that it's 20 years in the United States mean absolutely nothing if you do not bring compassion to the table, if you don't bring empathy to the table. And Chika for me was hardcore. It's a hardcore Nigeria, where he has seen the best and the worst of Nigeria. He's got the short end of the stick. He was rusticated from school. I don't want to give the story away, but yeah, he manages to survive and to thrive in that environment. And he was able to challenge Philip's preconceptions. And to my mind, that's why it worked so well, because he was able to, every time when Philip had an opinion, what you can call a condescending, patronizing opinion about, say, for instance, corruption in the country, he's able to just say, where are you coming from? Why do you think that you have the right to even say that? That's how it works here, and there's a method to the madness. And that was what Chika was able to do, to show that there was a method to the madness. And I think that towards the end of the story, Chika was able to guide Philip to a point where he could understand that same humanity that I was talking about, that these are not a strange breed of people. These are not weird people or strange people. These are people, period. These are people. And I was also humbled by the experience. And I remember one of my tutors saying, when I was having problems writing it, and I said, I just can't reconcile this act of brutality with my people, with my country. And he says, then write a love letter to your country. And for me, it was a love letter, because while I was writing Lightseekers, I really, really genuinely rediscovered my love for my country and my countrymen, but also within the context of my love for humanity.
And Philip, there's the story that he's investigating, but of course, in any good novel, there's also his personal story, what he's going through in his life, and he's has a couple of teenage kids. He fears that his wife may be stepping out on him. So he has his own story too.
Yeah, he has that. And I think that was also necessary, because this was my first novel. A lot of people have asked me, what is the parallel between Philip and myself? I sometimes feel that when I think I need to speak to my editor about Femi trained as a clinical psychologist, because every time I read that, I feel like a fraud. Yes, I did go to school and study clinical psychology, but I never practiced. I never did. I just knew from very early on that I was not going to be the perfect, therapist or doctor.
Right.
And all that. But there was a lot of, the reason why I needed Philip to have a personal challenge was because I needed to give voice to my own insecurities as a first-time novelist. And so I needed to express that insecurity in some way, and so he needed to have some kind of personal jeopardy that he was into. And I wasn't interested in giving him a personal danger, like a thriller or whatever. I needed him to have a personal issue that he needed to sort out. And that, even at that particular point in time, was very parallel to my own experience as a middle-aged debut, hoping to be published author, whereby I worried whether I was good enough. I worried if I had made some mistakes in my life, in my career, and some of my choices. I have teenage children, teenage boys too. So it was an opportunity for me to explore some of my own insecurities, but using the suspicion of infidelity as a metaphor for my own sense of inadequacy going into this new form of writing.
Right. That's interesting. So can you talk a little bit about, we don't want to give too much away about the topic. Everybody needs to pick this up and read it. We've given them a good taste of what it's about. Can you talk a little bit about just your path to getting published? You won that competition, and was this, how did you come to write this? Was this your first attempt at a novel, or do you have previous attempts and other things?
I've always written, I've always made my living as a writer. So I started I wrote my first play during my undergraduate days, and you mount the plays in those days and you make some money off it, and then you write the next one, kind of thing. So I've always made a living off writing in one form or the other, so I went into screenwriting. I was writing stage plays, and I was lucky. There was a competition by a cable channel for new writers, and I adapted one of my stage plays into a screenplay, and it won the competition. And that was how I started writing screenplays, and then I went to University of Southern California on a scholarship with the Packard Foundation. So I did study a bit of screenwriting there, I came back and
USC?
USC, yeah. So I did go to, I went to USC, and then I came back to Nigeria, and I was working in advertising. So I was a copywriter because I knew it was not sustainable for me to be a writer in the true sense of the word. So I needed to have a day job, and advertising really fed into it. So I've always I was a copywriter. I started out as a copywriter. I'm still a copywriter. I'm still in advertising. I'm the creative director of an advertising agency. So I've always written, but in one form or the other. But I've never attempted writing a novel. And so why did I decide to write a novel? Because I actually got tired of my work my person being subsumed at the altar of either the brand or the production. And I thought the novel was the one way that I could have a voice and you could hear me, and I could own the process from the beginning to the end. So if you've ever written a screenplay before, you know that as soon as you give it out and it goes to hundreds of production people, it's no longer yours. It's no longer yours. But a novel is yours from the beginning, from chapter 1 to the end. It's yours. It really is yours, and it doesn't matter how many editorial notes you get. And a lot of people complain, oh, the publisher wanted me to change this, but you changed it. You changed it. In film, they don't need your permission to change it. You know, they don't need your permission to change it. Even on a radio production, they don't need your permission right there and then. The actor can say, no, I don't like how this reads. Can I read it this way? And then the director goes, oh, yeah, try it that way. I like that. Nobody needs the writer after that point, at production point. But from a novel writing point of view, from a prose writing, long form writing point of view, I really was excited about finding my voice and finding my creative voice and holding on to it till the end of the process. And I think at 45, when I decided to do that, I needed that. I needed that affirmation, you know, I needed it really, really. It was an existential issue. So I went back to school to study crime fiction, creative writing at University of East Anglia. And Lightseekers came out because it was my thesis. I needed to write a novel. So it was my thesis. And it was one of the, and the award came out, and everybody in class applied for the award. You automatically entered. All theses are entered, and I got the award because I entered because I went to that school. But I think the journey to publication was, I don't think I would have had the guts or the courage to get an agent or go after a publishing deal if I wasn't within that creative writing environment at the University of East Anglia. I was very much encouraged by my tutors. They exposed us to the industry, the publishing industry, because remember, I'm coming from Africa, so I was able to access a world that was very much alien to me in my real time lived experience in Namibia, for instance. So the journey was intentional from the moment I decided I wanted to write a novel, from the moment I decided I was going to go to the University of East Anglia, and from the moment I won the award. And even I always joke about it, even my query letter to agents was winner of Little Brown 6 representation. So I was very, very, very intentional. I wasn't a 20-year-old green-eyed, all naive. I knew exactly what I was going in for. I was very intentional. That's all I can say. So it was a matter of preparation meeting luck, right? Yeah, that's how. It's preparation meeting luck. I was lucky, but I was very prepared.
Well, I would think that, now that I think about it, in advertising, there's an awful lot of human psychology involved in advertising. You have to be a student of psychology, I imagine, to do it well, advertising.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, and I think that's what makes psychology such a fascinating field, because there's almost no field that does not require a certain level of psychology, understanding of human behavior. You market books, you give it out to people, and you have to encourage people to read these books, and you encourage them and all that. That requires a certain level of understanding of human nature and how their attitude towards the written word, for instance. There's a field of psychology for that. It's called cognitive psychology, for instance. So yes, in advertising, there is a need for it. Actually, my first job, the reason why I got a job in advertising was because I actually had a background in psychology. And my first brand that I worked on was a Pfizer product called Zoloft, which was an antidepressant. And Zoloft, exactly. Yeah. It was that. And so I don't think that there is any experience a human being goes through, either academically or in training and whatever, that does not come in handy in anything that you decide to do to make a living. You have to use all your experiences. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love writing so much, because I can't say that I am writing this book because I'm a psychologist. And I think that's why I say I'm going to remove that line from my next profile. No, Femi is a human being that loves writing and telling stories. But really, I wrote Lightseekers because I love telling stories, and I'm advertising because advertising has been good to me. It's not boring. I'm constantly working on different brands. I'm working with people, and I'm affecting culture and movements and generations. One of my biggest brands in Namibia, for instance, is a telecom brand, and they are going on their their IPO recently, and we're working constantly on it. We created the campaign and all of that, and it just launched 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, wow, I'm a part of history, kind of thing, and that's advertising. It's just for a while. It's just for 5 minutes of fame, but that's just beautiful.
Affects a huge number of people.
Yes, and it's affecting. When you think about Budweiser, what's up, when you think about Coca-Cola, and you think about how some of these brands have affected how we think, and how we see each other, you realize that advertising is a very, very fascinating field to be in. And it's a very humbling field, because for every creative act that you do, you have to subsume yourself, your individuality at the altar of that brand. So you're not the audience. Nobody's going to come over to you and say, oh, well done for that commercial, because they don't know you. They only know Bud Light, And I think that was when I had that existential crisis in my 40s, when I said, oh no, but where am I here? Who remembers that I created that line? Who remembers that? Who knows that I created that line? The brand is forgotten. The brand has forgotten me, moved on to another advertising agency. And the people don't really care. They just want to drink the beer.
Right. So you need a creative outlet.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's next for you? Are you have you written a second novel with these characters, or?
Yeah, that's a good, I just got the most beautiful text message from my editor today. I submitted the first draft of the sequel, and he loves it. So I'm very excited about that. It was a very tough, the idea of the difficult second novel is very real. And so I was very nervous about it. And he has copious amount of notes on it, but according to him, that means that he loves it. So I'm
Josh?
Josh
Kendall?
Josh Kendall.
Yeah,
so
he's a brilliant guy.
He's brilliant. He's brilliant, wonderful, and he truly, truly, truly loves the genre. So I just finished the second book. I'm very excited to get into the editing, because I have a huge support system in the publishing space. And I'm working, I've already put together the structure for the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one.
Wow.
And the sixth one.
Really? Fantastic.
No, I love these characters, and I love the feedback that I'm getting about them. I never thought that people would take to Chika this much,
yeah.
For instance. But you will go to Goodreads. I go to Goodreads because I've still not seen a single, I've not been privileged to see Lightseekers in the bookshops. Because
really?
the book was launched during the pandemic. So all my interaction with readers has been online.
Right.
And I promise you, I would go to Goodreads, and almost every other comment is, oh, I like the book. Oh, I like Philip, but Chika, oh wow, Chika, I really, really like Chika, and I'm like, wow, and some people, for instance, would pick the wife, Philip's wife, and talk about how much they really like her character and the strength and all that. And so the new life they have in the second book is actually informed by the feedback that I got, that, Chika is actually this, Chika is strong, Chika is powerful, Chika is an asset to this experience, so to speak. And Philip Taiwo himself obviously is coming back. His wife is coming back. His children are going to play a much larger role in this new one. And the case is a very, very unique case. I'm not going to give it away, but I really, really enjoyed writing it.
Fantastic. That's great. I can't wait to read it. What's your title? It'll probably change, right?
It might, but the whole of Light, the whole of the Philip Taiwo series is hinged on the Light series. Remember, it's knowledge, finding knowledge. So all the stories are hopefully going to hinge on light. Okay. And in this case, so this story is, for now, the working title is Gaslight.
Gaslight? Oh boy, a lot of that going around.
I know. Yeah, I tend to be very topical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Femi, it's really been a pleasure to talk with you. And I'm sorry it took so long.
Oh, no, God. It was worth waiting for.
Yeah. And so everybody watching, this is the book we've been talking about, Lightseekers. We have copies available at the bookstore. So order a copy. I'll put a link when I post this video. I'll put a link to our web store if you'd like to purchase one. And thanks so much. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing on some of my favorite authors in your bookshop and your virtual events. I've learned so much from watching your events. I've improved as a writer. It's funny the kinds of things that you guys have achieved with these virtual events that typically without the pandemic we wouldn't have been able to access.
The truth, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this brilliant book, Razorblade Tears, I actually got from you guys, from S.A. Cosby.
Yep.
I also got a very wonderful reference from you for Fallen by T.J.
T.J. Newman.
T.J. Newman, brilliant, absolutely brilliant book. You guys, I've learned so much, and I'm so grateful for platforms such as you and independent bookstores such as yours, because without you, I don't know whether people would have gotten to even know that we exist. They would just walk through bookshops and they don't have any guide, to how to access this exciting stories that are being told all over the world. So thank you so much.
You bet. It's funny because, we do so many of them. And, Barbara, myself, and some of the other staffers here, we're such enthusiasts, and it's fun to do them, but you put them out there into the void and you're not sure if anybody's watching, And so it's kind of cool to you get these messages from halfway around the world from you, And so I've met some people all over the world that way that I wouldn't have before.
Yes. So thank you so much. Thank you,
Femi.
Thank you.
Safe travels back home. And let's stay in touch too.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.